Charlie.
Hey, Adam.
Yes, how are you?
So the last time we talked, we had just done a screening at BAM, right?
I think you were just. It was right around that time.
Yeah.
It would have been right around the time, and
I thought it was a sort of a great moment to let people have a peek at the Jamal Shabazz project that I've been working on for 9 or 10 years.
Oh my God.
And we did a fantastic screening at BAM, which was packed house. A lot of people that were very involved in the film were there, and people that knew a lot about Jamal were in the audience, and so it was a very intense group of people.
Because he would sort of set up these photos. They were intentionally posed. That was his whole sort of approach to it. It was not documentary style. These were posed photos, and that was part of his whole thing was getting them to do the gestures.
His
and
whole
the poses
thing is like to be out and about,
Jamal
usually
Shabazz
on the street.
about.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Jamal Shabazz is into being out on the street and making some kind of real connection to people. The photography comes later. And that's one of the things that really sets him apart from what most street photography is capturing people without them noticing. That's the whole idea of most street photography. So the idea of someone engaging someone and then posing them for a photograph really runs against the grain of what most street photography is about. But it comes out of a whole nother tradition of street photography that comes out of, let's say, the Times Square street photography of people posing for Polaroid cameras, and which goes into the 70s and in a way goes right into the earliest hip hop records that we have.
It's awesome. And so I was wondering in that he would sort of embed himself in these little stories, each photograph or whatever.
He doesn't embed himself.
Well, only in the sense that
he
engages them. He engages them,
right?
And he enters into the.
It's not really about putting himself into the picture. It's about him making a connection to these people,
Sure.
and on some other level, trying to elevate the situation to something that he thinks is, going somewhere that he wants to see happen. It's like a way of transforming the world, really, one person at a time.
So I wonder if since he created his relationships, if any of them were kind of maintained, and if these people are still coming, like if any of them came from.
A number of people I was surprised to see at the screening, and he got in touch with them.
Really?
And so I was shocked because I hadn't, some of them I hadn't met before, and they were people that were part of this whole archive that he produced over, 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that film has gone through some changes since that screening.
Mm-hmm.
And I've added a lot of new material to it, and I really consider it now a new movie. And Art House is going to be distributing it, and I consider Art House the premier distributor of documentary films.
It's fantastic. And
so I'm very happy with that.
When is that happening?
This year, sometime coming up. When I say this year, I'm looking over a period of 2013 is this year coming up.
I understand.
We're looking towards a larger sphere,
right?
And in a Art House is also distributing Wild Style, which I think is going to be fantastic. We're going to do a Blu-ray version of that film, and that will also be in 2013.
Is this? Are you officially breaking news here?
I'm breaking something. I don't know what I'm breaking. It may not be official. I don't know if the official news of this development has come out, but I'm very excited about it. And in a shorter term, we have a lot of screenings that are happening this summer that I think are interesting that we could talk about.
Yeah, sure. Well, we know one. that's coming up on July 10th, which is on Tuesday, July 10th, as part of the Brooklyn Hip Hop Festival.
Well, the thing is that they had an interest in pairing Big Fun in the Big City with Wild Style.
Mm-hmm.
That film is not very well known, and I think pairing it with Wild Style is sort of a way to introduce people to the film and let people know about it. And it was a hip hop film that was made in Harlem and in the Bronx, in other locations in Queens, in I think it was 1986. So from my vantage point, it's a very different period of hip hop, but it's certainly old school in its own level. And
so there's that. What are you mentioned that you have some other?
Well, so Wild Style will show at the Brooklyn Public Library on July 10th. I think it's 7 as part of that festival.
Right. In the Dweck Center.
And the day before that, I'm very excited to talk about this, is that I'm going to be showing a whole program of more recent hip-hop related films that I've been making. And there's quite a variety of that to talk about right now, going right up to films that I'm still editing as we speak. I'm still trying to... I'm putting some films into the hamper that have not necessarily been tested with an audience before, which, every filmmaker, every audience likes to have that last painting or that last film get finished and send it out. So that's always fun for me, because it has to do with what I'm thinking about now a lot, and what kind of changes I've made as a filmmaker. The whole world has changed a lot. And on some level, I feel like I'm trying to keep up with all the changes around me.
I remember going to a retrospective of was it Lucien Freud, one of those guys, and you're seeing everything, and you're just walking through, and it's chronological, so you just keep getting closer and closer, and it was 2002 or something like that when I was there. I can't remember how far back it was. I think at MoMA or somewhere. Yeah. And I just kept imagining you get to the end of it, and there he is sitting there painting his last work. It kind of feels like that.
He did paint right up until the end.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of those are great. Mm-hmm. In this particular screening, which is going to be on July 9th at Yotel, which is on 42nd Street and 10th Avenue.
Your old neighborhood.
It's my old neighborhood, doing time in Times Square and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hotel called Yotel, and they have a screening room up on the 7th floor, and it's kind of cool. They serve wine, and it's very... It's a nice scene that they're developing there, and I've invited a group that I've done work with who you may know them as 9/11 or 9/11 Thesaurus, a group of young MCs from Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
And I made a movie recently with them called All City, which was largely shot on the Brooklyn Bridge, and it is a part of the whole thing that I've been into, which is to make music films which are about people performing in the film itself. In other words, it's a kind of live way to shoot a film, and I'm combining meaningful locations with unique performances by artists that I think are really fantastic and important. And so it's a way of crystallizing the musical form. I'd like to think of it as a single. In other words, if there's all kinds of musical forms, there's ballads and there's opera form is a musical form. Well, this is more like a single. In other words, it's not it's kind of a short movie. It has its own it makes its own statement in, let's say, 5 to 8 minutes.
Okay, and so this series of films is going to be at Yodel. Is that Yodel?
Yeah,
like
it's called
Yotel.
Yodel.
Yodel. It sounds like a little bit of Yiddish kind of thing going on there, but I don't think that's probably correct. So it's
Or
on a
you could just say yo.
So it's on Monday, July 9th?
Yes.
Okay.
That's at 7. And so I'm going to have these guys from 9/11 are going to come perform that evening.
Well, that's kind of germane to BBox. I just want you to, I know you may not know, but BBox is very much entrenched in the whole, that scene, when a number of their hosts are, for their music programming, are people that are coming out of a DJ, and some of their shows are also hearken back to like the golden age of hip hop, or specific specific time frames of hip hop, or other types of urban music.
So making a lot of these short films has been a way also for me to reach in to a talent pool that I've kept in touch with over the last 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like I made a film with Grandmaster Kaz called Bongo Barbershop.
Oh, yes.
And I consider Grandmaster Kaz one of the premier MCs, certainly of the whole foundation of hip-hop, one of the greatest lyricists. And I worked with him throughout Wild Style. The basketball scene was a major scene that he and I spoke about, and he was in development. He wrote and performed the theme song to Wild Style, and so we've remained close. And so I did this scene in which there's a kind of MC battle that takes place in a barbershop in a location in the Bronx, which people don't really think about that much, but it's in fact the location where hip hop was born, where Kool Herc began throwing hip hop parties in 1973. The barbershop is right down the block, and in the movie, I have this guy who happens to be from Tanzania who's lost in the Bronx, according to the movie.
Right.
It's a kind of, conceit.
Uh-huh.
To have this African lost in the Bronx, and he wanders into the barbershop and asks directions, and he says, "Where can I find the real hip-hop?" So he sits down for a haircut and ends up in an MC battle with Grandmaster Kaz, and he comes back to when he's in this MC battle, he rhymes back in Swahili, which confounds the room,
right,
but ultimately brings the battle to another level.
Right, sure.
Because we're now in an international situation with hip-hop where it's all languages and it's all countries.
And, I mean, there was an element of some strains of hip-hop which were Afrocentric,
so,
even though they were in English.
Absolutely, but also in a greater way, we're going back to, back to the Bronx, right, back to the origins of hip-hop, to Kool Herc, and in some other way, we're trying to take it back to Africa.
Yes.
And say that's, of course, where all this music comes from,
yes, and
where these musical forms derive from. So there's a kind of full circle being done in this movie in 8 short minutes.
It's remarkable.
With no voiceovers and no subtitles.
You'll be there at the doing it, and you'll do the post as.
So that's what I'm trying to do, is to utilize people that are here, artists that I can work with, and to make films that have some kind of thing to have a message in a sense,
right?
And also give people a chance to see. I want to show, like, not just this guy from Tanzania, but to show, hey, Grandmaster Kaz, he's like the best. He's right here among us. Don't think of him as something from 30 years ago.
Right. It's still relevant.
So that's part of the message.
Yes.
And that's part of the circle. Like, let's keep in touch with these guys.
Talking with Charlie Ahearn, filmmaker Charlie Ahearn. So where does this drive come from that you're still you're still getting juiced by basically the same subjects that you have been from the beginning of your career, which is very much an organic
and
street.
Going out and seeing what's out on the street has always been inspirational to me, whether it's graffiti or street art or seeing how people are acting and having some way to inspire a movie based on these things. And the idea of producing music, because when these films are made, we're into song production. We're making things happen. Like the thing with 9/11 on the Brooklyn Bridge, that involves a brass band playing something that has strains of New Orleans in it.
Sure, it sounds like it.
And so, again, we're talking about looking at music in a much broader sense.
Mm-hmm.
Louis Armstrong is hip hop. If you want to look at it in a broad sense,
mm-hmm.
we don't have to call it hip hop. Let's just call it music. But it's all connected, and I'm interested in activism and how people use hip hop to organize things, and so people in a number of some of the artists in these films are working with megaphones, mm-hmm, which is a kind of like standard like prop from what we all remember from 60s activism, from civil rights era to anti-war demonstrations to today, everything that's happening with the Occupy movement and everything else. Do you think that's
sort of these are unconscious organic sort of choices people make?
Well, if you start to try to produce film with live music, you have lots of questions that you immediately have to answer, which is what's going to be live about the music? Are you going to have like someone carrying a box to provide musical accompaniment, or is there going to be a beatboxer there? Is that how music could be produced in some natural way out in the street? I mean, in that case, on the Brooklyn Bridge, we actually had a live brass band playing, which was certainly part of the whole early movement of jazz and everything, that those were musicians that were meant to march. Those instruments were meant to be marched and meant to be played, whether it was a funeral march or it was a celebration. So it's all a natural kind of instinct, and the idea of picking up a megaphone is a natural way, because if you got a brass band, you can't exactly you can't mic people emceeing. They would be drowned out by the brass band. So the megaphone gives them a leg up, and they, in a sense, could be standing next to a trumpet,
right,
or a
trombone,
or a tuba,
right,
which would give a lot of sound. So again, these are ways of combining things, and a lot of what I try to do is a cappella, so that the performer can really have an emphasis on the rhythm of the lyric and the sound of it, and not just what he's saying, but how it's being expressed through music. So the one of the things I've been working with a lot is using beatboxing in relationship to that, which again goes back to hip hop in its infancy, because people were always doing some kind of thing with their mouth or beating on the side of a car to make a beat, and it's natural, right?
Yeah, on the way over here on the subway, the Broadway line seems to attract a number of these a cappella groups, aging men, but they walk through together.
There's the doo-wop groups.
And they one usually does a sort of a variation of the BBox, which is the bass line, or
I've always wanted to put doo-wop, these old doo-wop guys, which I always associate with the Bronx too. There was a lot of early doo-wop that came out of the Bronx in the 50s, but I always want to pair them with beatboxers.
Mm-hmm.
To give a whole different sound to it.
Yeah.
To give a different kind of because the beatboxers kind of represent young people.
Right.
And doo-wop is invariably, I don't know how it happens that they're invariably much older, but they are. I've been listening, hearing music on the subway and working around music on the subway for the last 2 years. One of my major focuses has been carrying a little Canon pocket camera that shoots HD film and makes actually beautiful sound recording and really crisp pictures. And it's kind of all taped up, so you don't really notice it. People hardly even notice that it's in my hand. And I'm able to record dozens and dozens of people on the subway performing and doing various things that are music related, whether it's emceeing or a lot of like mariachi bands coming on the subway, or break dancers coming on the subway with their boxes, and people with headphones that are so loud that you can hear the music through the headphone. Yes. So it's all like, it's in my mind, it's a musical. It's like when I was doing Wild Style, I happened upon a street ball game on West 4th Street. And if you've ever gotten out of the stop on West 4th Street,
sure,
you in the A train, there's a one of the great street ball cages there.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point I got out and I was working on Wild Style, and I saw someone was setting up a turntable on the other side of the court. I guess they were going to play there later in the afternoon. But every once in a while they would blast a little bit of music and people were playing street ball. And in my mind, I'm watching a musical. It could be West Side Story, whatever it is. In my mind, it's already a musical. And I feel like that's what I feel like when I enter the subway. I'm entering a musical zone where even things that aren't musical to me are transformed into a movie.
Yeah.
And so that's been one of the most exciting things for me, is the idea that every time I leave my house, I'm packing my Canon camera and I'm making a movie. And it doesn't even matter whether the camera is turning on. I'm judging and I'm pre-producing a movie as I'm riding the subway. And I don't need to go into detail, but I'm going to show some of these most recent films that I've been shooting on the subways at Yotel on July 9th. So you can come check it out.
Well, I'll be there. I can't wait. This reminds me, when you talk about music and you talk about the connections that exist in music, and how you hear all the connections and the commonalities. It sounds similar to me. So whether it's a Tanzanian guy coming to a barbershop in the Bronx, or what's going on in a subway car, maybe in one ride.
It's all
as you pass through the tunnels under the streets of New York. There's so much connectivity there.
I mean, part of it is just losing what we think of as all the packaging of filmmaking. What do you do if you lose this packaging and that packaging? How do you reduce it down to just direct form of experience? And I'm not talking about making a documentary. I'm talking about filmmaking as a direct living experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it gets interesting to me. It's certainly something that I was working on before I made Wild Style, was the idea of how do you make this really direct, and how do you glean all this artistry and talent that's all around us. It's like when I go out in the streets of New York, it's around us.
Mm-hmm.
How do you glean this? And then how as a filmmaker, do you craft that into something without all the packaging? Lose all the packaging. What is left? And what most people think of is, oh, you mean like a documentary? And I go, no, it's not a documentary. It's something else. So it can have a story in it, but you just want enough to keep people involved. So it's not a drama.
No.
On the other hand, it's not a film of a performance that someone's giving someplace. That's not it either. It's about making a movie, which has to do with the movement through a location, and it has to do with real life and being as close to that as you can get. And I've tried lots of different camera equipment and lots of different working with this kind of crew or working with that kind of crew. And how do you want your best quality or everything to be as good as it can. But on the other hand, you don't want anything in your way. And you want to be able to be flexible and direct about it. So I also, I've just done a couple series on the subway, which was not done by chance. In other words, I've just described previously a lot of filmmaking that's done purely by chance, of being there and having something happen. But also there's a whole nother way of working, which is you work with someone that's really talented and you go out into the subway with them and you shoot, or any other location. Right. And I learn from both. I'm completely, I don't see them as one is better than the other, or I learn from both approaches. I haven't really set what it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
I appreciate it. We're going to definitely have to sit down for part 2, I think, at some point.
Okay.
This has been Adam Shartoff here on Filmwax Radio on BBoxRadio.com. Until next time.